really reiterate a lot of the stuff that Joe did and Julia did. So I'm going to be basically looking at this from perspective of the serial entrepreneur. I've been here in the state of Florida for over 20 years. I've been working in the mobility space for roughly about 15 years. I've been on the board of directors for the Limousine Association, the Motor Coach Association. And back in about 2017, there was this Jamaican guy that came into my office, and he was from this company called Beep. And he was letting me know about all these great and wonderful things that he could do for the villages where I was the vice president at that time. So he was telling me how he was going to be able to bring autonomous vehicles into the villages and be able to move people autonomously. Well, I was sitting there and I was going, wow, that would be a great idea if we could actually do that, because we have golf cart lanes there. And he told me he was going to be in Lake Nona and how he was going to start up this thing with this company called Tavistock in Lake Nona. Well, he started telling me about the future city and how we were going to move people. Well, currently at the time, in the villages, we were moving tons of people to and from the airport, 15 shuttle runs a day, with every vehicle doing about 110,000 miles a year. Now, with that comes a lot of gasoline consumption, comes a lot of maintenance, a lot of oil changes, and then if a bus breaks down, you got a lot of mad people, okay? So when I decided, hey, Mark, wouldn't it be cool if we could do at least an electric fleet company in the city of Lake Nona, because it's kind of a living lab there. You get to experiment with some stuff. You get to try things, fail at a lot of stuff too. So, which one? Signal. So one of the challenges that we had is, how did we convert people from a legacy mindset of going from fossil fuel vehicles, commercialized, into electric fleet vehicles, okay? So we had to look at that from alternative modes of transportation. Electric vehicles, we thought, okay, we can solve that with Tesla. Tesla had just started working back on the Model 3 back in 2016 and 17, back during their production hell phase, okay? So we started looking at, hey, how could we transition people from fossil fuel vehicles into electric vehicles and ultimately into autonomy? Next slide, please. So then we started looking at multimodal solutions. There are things out there that didn't consume fossil fuels. Those were things like scooters, bicycles, okay, electric vehicles. And at that same time period, we were going through a thing that VW called Dieselgate, okay? So I became part of one of the committees that was part of the Dieselgate mitigation program. So we were about ready to get a bunch of funding here in the state of Florida to be able to electrify a lot of commercial fleet vehicles. And we were going to take a lot of fossil fuel, diesel fuel vehicles off of our city streets. And we were going to have to drill holes in these combustion engines to be able to electrify our buses, to be able to electrify our multimodal type of system for just passenger vehicles. And we could do that with Nissan Leafs. We could do that with Chevy Bolts. We could do that with Teslas. And at that time, I was working on commercial stuff with the Limousine Association and thinking, okay, well, we can't really get these guys to transition from a full fleet of vehicles that they've already got payments on to a Model S Tesla or a Model X Tesla that costs upwards of $80,000, $110,000. So how do we transition them and transition entire communities into multimodal transportation? So we started with a project that was called Safe Rider, Safety in Motion. Omnimodal already had a pilot type of software that they were working with the city of Orlando on at the time. So we started testing this stuff, and we're talking raw data, crunching data, seeing how many people we were utilizing, scooters, bicycles, pedestrians, buses, and compressing all this data, utilizing the omnimodal system for multimodal. Next slide, please. Then we decided, okay, what if we really went outside the box and started thinking of alternative, disruptive types of mobility solutions? What about the three-wheel vehicle? I heard of these guys. They were out there on the West Coast. They're called Arcimoto. They had developed this three-wheel autocycle. And you could actually transport 1 and 2 passengers. During COVID, we found that 2 of our key metrics were 1 and 2 passengers, and it was a 15-mile radius of pickup and drop-off point. We collected that data from Uber and Lyft and Blacklane and GroundLink. We looked at those 2 key metrics and said, this is how people move. 85% of all of our mobility solutions could be solved with a 3-wheel vehicle. So I started reaching out to this company, and I talked to their fleet manager. His name was Sam Fittipaldi. Also talked to their CEO. His name is Mark Frommer. I said, look, it looks like you guys really have only created like 100 of these things. What are you doing about going to scale? Because I really believe by my data that you're going to be the next solution to scaled mobility in our country. And they were like, well, funny you say that. We really have a legislative problem. We don't even have language yet in any of these states that really look at the auto cycle, a 3-wheel electric ground mobility solution. So I started talking to some of my friends in the state legislature. One of the guys was Rene Placencia. He was our District 50 House of Representative here in Orange County. His district went from basically Lake Nona all the way over to the Space Coast at Kennedy Space Center. He said, you know what, we have some initiatives that are going on right now trying to electrify fleets and also build it into autonomy. And I also know this guy, his name is David Santiago. He was a 4-term representative up in Volusia County. Our Space Coast District 50 basically goes from Volusia County all the way down Brevard County, down to Melbourne, and it goes as far west as the city of Orlando, Lake Nona, UCF's campus. If we could think about actually getting the language in there for auto cycle, then we could start talking about all the other aspects of it for autonomy in the future when our regulators really start buying to this. Level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 autonomy. So we came up with the language for auto cycle through a lot of attorneys, through a lot of discussions with our state representatives, and we tied it into House Bill 1289. This was a bill that was going to be presented on the floor in 2021 at the very first session. And we tied it into autonomy, so once we got the language of auto cycle tied into a bill, we don't have to go back and go through and rehash how do we get it built into an autonomy bill. So we built the auto cycle language into House Bill 1289, which is essentially for electric 3-wheel vehicles that can be utilized for autonomous delivery of products. So that's how we got it passed. So Arcimoto became one of our key companies that we were working with from the West Coast. And one of their biggest problems is, how do we go to scale? How do we fund this thing? Well, they had just gone through their IPO in 2017, along about the same time that I was starting on this project. We started working with companies from the Florida Venture Capital Fund. Also started working with these guys from the Blockchain Consortium. Dr. Max Hooper, Dr. David Metcalf, AJ Rippin. Dr. Hooper has more doctorate degrees than I have grandkids. He's got 5 doctorate degrees. Dr. Metcalf, former NASA scientist now, he's in charge of the IST department at UCF. AJ Rippin, he's on our governor's council, working on things like the Florida-Israeli partnership. So we decided, hey, we were going to start putting together venture capital money and start bringing these guys to the East Coast to start adapting 3-wheel electric vehicles and introducing it to the East Coast. These guys are in Eugene, Oregon. You know, a bunch of tree huggers. These guys are working with the state of California. They're working with the state of Washington. Only 3 states the auto cycle language had even been adapted yet. So then we brought it here to the state of Florida and got it passed here in our state legislators. So then they needed money to be able to do the startup. So then I started introducing them to some of the people in Tavistock, in Lake Nona, getting people familiarized with what it's like to operate a 3-wheel electric vehicle as an alternative mode of transportation, thus trying to hit on that key metric of 85% of all mobility needs. You don't need a 4,000-pound electric vehicle to move you from point A to point B. These things are 1,300 pounds. They consume less voltage. There's less mass in creating the vehicle when you actually have to do manufacturing. So at 2/3 less the cost to manufacture, 2/3 less the maintenance, less consumption of energy to be able to put it on the grid. And then alternatively, for sustainability purposes, what is it like to whenever you have to power it up with solar panels, battery backups? So it became the art of the possible. What can we really do with creating this type of capital around something that we can bring to scale here within 2022, 2023? Next slide, please. So they came up with this type of form factor vehicle. Essentially, it's the base. 90% of all manufacturing of this vehicle is the base. Then kind of like a Ford chassis, you just put whatever shell you want on top. So they call it multiple shots on goal. We are bringing this product now. This week, we are starting to launch it at the Wave Hotel in Lake Nona, Florida. Multiple shots on goal, three-wheel electric vehicle. Next slide, please. We've also tied it into the University of Central Florida. This is their research department. We've tied it in with the College of Engineering. That is Dr. Adi, who is doing a safety study here in Orlando, in Lake Nona. We are tying it in to make sure that these vehicles are totally safe, passing all NHTSA, all DOT, safety certifications. That thing has a roll cage on it that's been crash tested up to 10,000 pounds. That's why in the auto cycle language, you don't even have to have a motorcycle endorsement. It's got dual seat belts, a 5-point seat belt straps you in. In the event, there's an impact. It keeps you inside that roll cage. So you also don't have to have a motorcycle helmet. No motorcycle endorsement, no helmet. All you need is a regular driver's license to operate this vehicle. Why did we choose that? Well, we're talking to our state legislators in customer discovery during the UCF I-Corp program that we took this vehicle through. We found that our legislators really wanted tourism to stay kicked off during the whole COVID environment thing. They wanted an open air environment vehicle. They wanted no touch points. If you notice, there's no doors there. We talked to Kennedy Space Center. We talked to Disney. These people wanted the experience, open air environment. Enjoy your environment, but also still be able to get from point A to point B at a rate that's 45 miles an hour or more. So we passed the legislation on this vehicle that it's even operable on every toll road, every interstate, and every highway. Coming off the manufacturing line, these things go 75 miles an hour. My biggest hurdle was getting it registered with our DMV, Scott Randolph, to get it taxed so they could figure out a way. Because the first question I get was, what is it? I've never seen it before. It's disruptive innovation. It didn't have a classification. It didn't have a little checkbox that the people at the stalls when you went in to do a registration on a vehicle could check and say, well, it's not a motorcycle. It's not a car. Guess what? It's an auto cycle. We created the language for it, and our state legislators, it passed the House, the Senate, and our governor signed it into law July 1st last year. Next slide. So lessons learned. And it all started with COVID. It all started with me working in the limousine, the motor coach, moving a bunch of people with fossil fuel vehicles and deciding, you know what? I was lobbying for fuel surcharge taxes in D.C. in 2017. I looked at Daniel Webster, one of our state representatives, and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to work on electric vehicles. I want to be proud to be a grandfather and go home and look at my grandchildren and go, you know, Papa helped work on this one day. There's a little bit of legacy there. You know, don't be married to one idea. Don't just think, hey, I got this idea. When customers tell you that there's something that needs to be changed, listen to them. They're going to tell you what product is going to work. Always. They will tell you, good or bad. It's not always going to be pixie dust and roses. You're going to hear a lot of stuff you don't want to hear in your business. Also, allow input from everybody involved in your team. You know, don't just poo-poo any idea that comes across your plate because you're at a higher level or you're a director. People have some really good ideas out there, and give it a shot. The worst failure you can make as an executive, a VP, a CEO, is not giving it a shot. Try all the time and be prepared to fail. It's okay to fail. It's not okay to not try. Operate with integrity. You know, whenever you get to a phase of, am I going to make the right decision for money, or am I going to make the right decision for what's the best for the masses? Always go for what's the best for the masses. Don't go for the money. That's it.